Okay, so this is chapter 2 of the story of Mice and Men. The beginning of this chapter, it takes place at the bank house, which is the workers' sleeping quarters or bedroom. Bank house is described as a long, regular building. Inside the walls were whitewashed and the floor unpainted. Against the walls were 8 banks, these very simple uh, kinds of beds that are very hard actually. There were 2 shelves for personal belongings of the occupants of the bank, and these shelves were loaded with little articles such as soap, talcum powder, razors, magazines. There were medicines on the shelf, so probably indicating um, that the workers could take some medicine and look after themselves if they suffer from any pain. Combs and a stove to keep warm, and there was also a table with playing cards and boxes for the players to sit on. Okay, so there were no chairs. It was a very simple bedroom. A man came in and he said, "The boss was expecting you last night," the old man said. "He was sore as hell when you wasn't here to go out this morning." He pointed with his right arm, and out of the sleeve came a round stick like a wrist, but no hand. So he was a handicap. "You can have them 2 beds there," he said, indicated the 2 banks near the stove. George looked into his box shelf. "What the hell's this?" "Says positively kills lice, some piojos, roaches, cucarachas, and other scourges." "What the hell kind of a bed you're giving us, anyways?" George is kind of complaining. "I ain't so sure," said George skeptically. George lifted his stick and looked underneath it. He leaned over and inspected the sacking closely. Immediately Lenny got up and did the same with his bed. Finally George seemed satisfied. He couldn't see any insect or anything. So the old man said, "I guess the boss will be out here in a minute. He sure burned when you wasn't here this morning. Come right when he was eating breakfast and says, 'Where the hell then the new man?' And he give the stable back hell too." The stable back is a worker that works in the stable, and since the boss was really angry because these 2 new workers did not arrive on time, he was also angry with the stable back, with this worker. But pay attention that the stable back here says that he's a nigger. Okay, you see that the stable back's a nigger. Yeah, nice fellow too. Got a crooked back when a horse kicked him. The boss gives him hell when he's mad. So we can interpret that the boss, when he gets mad or angry, he mistreats. We don't know how, if there is some kind of physical mistreatment, but at least some verbal mistreatment. Okay? When he's mad, he mistreats the nigger, the stable back. But the stable back doesn't give a damn about that. He reads a lot, got books in his rooms. This old man that is indicating this characteristic of the stable man pays attention to the fact that this nigger has books in his room. So probably it was not very common for these people to keep the books and to read, and probably it was not expected for nigger, as they say in an offensive way, to read. Okay, what kind of a guy is the boss? George asked. "Well, he's a pretty nice fellow. Gets pretty mad sometimes, and he's pretty nice. Tell you what, know what he done Christmas? Bring a gallon of whiskey right in here and says, 'Drink hearty, boys. Christmas comes but once a year.' We had fun, and we let the nigger come in that night. I circled this because they allowed the nigger to come that night with them and share the whiskey and this kind of celebration because it was Christmas. This is indicating that the nigger was definitely discriminated and was not allowed to go out and to share and mix with the other workers. After that, the guys went into Soledad and Rice Hill. I didn't go in there. So the workers continued celebrating in the town, okay, in La Soledad. Then the door opened and a little stocky man stood in the open doorway. He wore blue jeans, a flannel shirt, a black unbuttoned vest, and a black coat, and a hat. He was not a laboring man, definitely. And he says, I wrote to Maria Brea and I wanted 2 men this morning. You got your working slips? George reached into his pocket and produced the slips and handed them to the boss. Says right here on the slip that you was to be here for work this morning. George looked down at his feet. Bus driver gave us a bum steer, he said. We had to walk 10 miles. Says we were here and we wasn't. We couldn't get no rides in the morning, so he's explaining what happened with the bus driver and they had to walk 10 miles and that's why they had to sleep at night next to the river. George scolded meaningfully at Lenny and Lenny nodded to show that he understood, okay? Tried to remind him that he was not supposed to speak at this moment. What's your name? George Milton. And yours? Indicating Lenny, okay? And George answered, saying, his name is Lenny Small. Where you boys been working? Up, round wheat, said George. You too? Said Lenny. Yeah, him too, said George. He ain't much of a talker, is he? No, he isn't, but he's sure a hell of a good worker, strong as a bull. Lenny smiled to himself. Strong as a bull, he repeated. George scolded at him and Lenny dropped his head in shame at having forgotten that he wasn't supposed to speak. The boss said suddenly, Listen, Small. Lenny raised his head. What can you do? In a panic, Lenny looked at George for help. He can do anything you tell him, said George. He's a wood skinner, a good worker. He can rustle greenbacks, drive a cultivator. He can do anything. Just give him a try. Then why you don't let him answer? What you trying to put over? So what are you trying to hide? Okay, the boss is discovering that there is something wrong here with Lenny. George working loudly. Oh, I ain't saying he's bright. He ain't. But I say he's a good damn good. He's a goddamn good worker. Says, what you selling? I said, what stake you got in this guy? You taking his pay away from him? So the boss believes here that George is taking his payment, his salary away from him, that George may be taking advantage of Lenny's condition. No, of course I ain't. Why you think I am selling him out? Well, I never seen one guy take so much trouble for another guy. I just like to know what your interest is. George says, he's my cousin. I told his old lady I would take care of him. He got kicked in the head by a horse when he was a kid. He's all right, just ain't bright, but he can do anything you tell him. And the boss says, well, God knows he don't need any brains to back barley bags. But don't you try to put nothing over. I got my eye on you. Why would you quit in wheat? Job was done, said George promptly. Here we can somehow see that the boss does not trust them, especially George, because somehow he can see that George responds for Lenny. He says that he's looking after him, but somehow he mistrusts them, okay? And that's why he also asks what kind of a job they were doing and where they were working and why they stopped working in the previous ranch, okay? And we know here that George is lying when he says that job was done, okay? They had to run away from weed, from that town, because of something bad that Lenny had done. So you wasn't going to say a word, okay? Now the boss has gone and now George is scolding Lenny, okay? He's telling him off. So you wasn't going to say a word. You was going to leave your big blackbird shut and let me do the talking. Damn near lost us the job. Lenny started hopelessly at his hands. I forgot, George. Yeah, you forgot. You always forget. Now, he's got an eye on us. Now we got to be careful and not make no slips, no make any mistakes. George, what you want now? I wasn't kicking the head with no force, was I, George? You said I was your cousin, George. Well, that was a lie, and I am damn glad it was. If I was a relative of yours, I would shoot myself. He stopped suddenly, stepped into the open front door, and peered out. Say, what the hell are you doing listening? So he noticed that there was somebody coming and that he could have heard their conversation. The old man that was coming slowly into the room. At his feet there walked a drag-footed sheepdog with pale, blind old eyes. I wasn't listening, this man said. You was poking your big ears into our business, George said. I don't like nobody to get nosy. The old man looked uneasily from George to Lenny and then back. I just came here, he says. I didn't hear nothing you guys was saying. I ain't interested in nothing you was saying. A guy on a ranch don't never listen nor he don't ask no questions. Come on in and sit down a minute, he said. That's a hell of an old dog, says George. Okay, this man was accompanied by this old blind dog. Yeah, I had them ever since he was a pup. God, he was a good sheepdog when he was younger. At that moment, a young man came into the bunkhouse, a thin man with a brown face, with brown eyes, and a head of a tightly curled hair. He wore a work glove on his left hand, and like the boss, he wore high-heeled boots. Seen my old man? He asked. The swamper, the other worker, said he was just here a minute ago. Curly? So Curly, the man that has just come into the bunkhouse, is the boss' son, and his name is Curly. His eyes passed over the young man and he stopped. He glanced coldly at George and then at Lenny. You the new guys the old man was waiting for? We just come in, said George. Let the big guy talk, he said. Lenny twisted in embarrassment. He didn't want to talk. So everybody is paying attention to Lenny, okay, and want him to talk, okay? George says, suppose he doesn't want to talk. And Curly says, by Christ, he's gonna talk when he's spoke to. What the hell you are getting in for? We travel together, said George coldly. Oh, so that's the way. George was tense and motionless. Yes, that's the way. Lenny was looking helplessly to George for instruction. And you won't let the big guy talk, is that it? He can talk if he wants to tell you anything. He nodded slightly at Lenny. We just come in, said Lenny softly. And Curly, well, next time you answer when you are spoke to, okay? But here we can see how Lenny is asking or is waiting for George's instructions to let him or to allow him to speak. But we can also see how the other guys perceive that there is something wrong with Lenny. George watched him go, and then he turned back to the swamper, saying, what the hell he's got in his shoulder? Lenny didn't do nothing to him. The old man looked cautiously at the door to make sure no one was listening. That's the boss' son, he said quietly. Curly's pretty handy. He's done quite a bit in the ring. He's a lightweight, and he's handy. He's very good at boxing, okay? And he's a lightweight boxer. George says, Lenny didn't do nothing to him. What's he's got against Lenny? The swamper considered. Well, tell you what, Curly's like a lot of little guys. He hates big guys. He's all the time picking scraps with big guys. Kind of like he's mad at them because he ain't a big guy. Okay, so Curly, since he's a boxer, he likes fighting and he always gets into trouble with big guys because he dislikes big guys. He would like to be big and he's really, really small. And now that's why he tried to have some kind of situation with Lenny. So George says, this Curly better make no mistakes about Lenny. Lenny ain't handy, But this curly punk is gonna get hurt if he messes around with Lenny. George is